Namaskar. Welcome to this new session. We have been looking into Patanjali Yoga Sutras. We are trying to get some orientation to Patanjali and his text. In the last session, I told you about the reality that Patanjali, as avatar of Adishesha, incarnation of primordial cobra, the snake, is an eternal being. And not only eternal being, he is class of what is called Nittya Suri. Because we are also all eternal. Metaphysically, we are all eternal beings. The divinity is eternal being. But then, Patanjali is of the class of what is called as Nittya Suris. That means he is a being from Sri Vaikuntham. And that Sri Vaikuntham is beyond the phenomenalism of kalpas, where there is deluge periodically in each kalpa. At the end of each kalpa, there is deluge. A kalpa extends for 8,640 million years, 8.64 billion years, 864 crores of years. And half of that, that is 432 crores of years, 4.32 billion years is deluge. So the day and night is a phenomenon in this universe called Brahmanda. But Sri Vaikuntham is beyond all that. It has no day and night. It has no creation dissolution. It is an eternal loka. It is an eternal plane. And the beings in eternal plane of Sri Vaikuntham are called Nittya Suris. I recall Purusha Sukta, where it is said, Tad Vishnoho Paramam Padagam Sada Pashyanti Surayaha. So, these Nittya Suris are ever citing Paravasudeva, Narayana in the abode of Vaikuntham. And the greatest of all aspects of Nittya Suris, which comes to Adishesha, is that Sriman Narayana reposes on Adishesha. So Nittya Suris have exalted something beyond satsanga, because we all spiritual seekers are craving for satsanga. Now understand the precisely prakrushta sattvasanga to all those who are in Sri Vaikuntham. And amongst all those Nitya Suris, Adishesha has a unique place because Sriman Narayana reposes on Adishesha. So we can imagine the vibrations that Adishesha was receiving by being bed of Sriman Narayana. Then this Adishesha manifests as Sriman Narayana has avatars in the vibhava aspect and archa aspect. That means Adishesha is also following Sriman Narayana in his incarnations. And we all very well know that in Sri Rama avatar, Lakshmana was Adishesha avatar. And in Krishna avatar, Balarama was Adishesha avatar. Then Patanjali, as Adishesha himself, manifested on his own accord as Patanjali. Traditionally, it is believed that Patanjali, why was called Patanjali, is that a Gonika, a tapaswini, with all her penance and all her knowledge pursuit, finally wanted the knowledge to be transmitted, and therefore she came to Ganga, picked up water for oblation, and she picked up some water in her hands to offer the entire knowledge, what we call as the process of Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. She wanted that knowledge to be offered. And when she picked up water, in the water came a tiny worm in her hands. And then she offered. So having fallen from the palm, the name came to be Patanjali. Anjali. Anjali is folded palms for offerings. And having fallen from folded palms in the water, the name Patanjali came. So, Gonika was considered to be mother of Patanjali. Although the fact was only a worm form, Patanjali, Adishesha, fell from her offering palms. So this comes in Patanjali Charitam, a kavyam, a piece of poetry, which is to describe Patanjali. So, that's another fact about Patanjali. Then Patanjali penned down a treatise on yoga in a philosophical framework. While the instructions for Patanjali came in Sri Vaikuntham, while the Pancharatra Agama was being shared by Sriman Narayana to all those in Sri Vaikuntham. In an assembly, Sriman Narayana gave a discourse, and that discourse came to know as Pancharatra. So it was said to be a session of some 5 days. And that is why it came to know as Pancharatra. More importantly, it came to mention the form of Adi Narayana, which are in 5 forms: para, vibhava, para, vyuha, vibhava, archa, antarayami. So that's the Bhagavad Rahasya. And to explain the Bhagavad Rahasya, which is in 5 forms, then where there are Chatur Vyuhas, Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. So these are the important precepts of Pancharatra Agama. And among so many discourses, there were some discourses relating to yoga of the nature of restraint. Apart from that, Pancharatra has so many aspects touched. Primarily, the one is the temple, construction of temple, worship forms in the temple. This is all with regards to temples of Vishnu. So there are so many things which come in Pancharatra Agama. There are many samhitas even available today, which describe the worship form, the temple construction, etc. Then also Karma Yoga and this yoga of the nature of restraint. So it is that is the source for Patanjali to get to know about the yoga, on which he pens down a treatise which is in a framework of darshana. As I told you, there are certain conventions to formulate a darshana shastra, and Patanjali, of course, is the premier person to pen down darshana shastra. Now, in Yoga Sutra, there are 4 quarters, 4 padas. The first one is Samadhi pada, the second one is Sadhana pada, the third one is Vibhuti pada, and the fourth one is Kaivalya pada. The Samadhi pada comes to mention the definition, etc., of yoga, and yoga of one on supreme hierarchy called Uttamadhikari. So the yoga of Uttamadhikari is mentioned in the first chapter. It is very appropriate, having defined yoga, that essential yoga, quintessential yoga is mentioned. Then comes the second chapter called Sadhana Pada. It is a chapter on means of yoga. And this is the yoga of a Madhyamadhikari. So the Madhyamadhikari's yoga is expressly mentioned in Yoga Sutra as Kriya Yoga, which comes in the opening part of the second chapter, second quarter, second pada. And then also second chapter comes to mention the yoga of Adhamadhikari, one on the lowest hierarchy, that is Ashtanga Yoga. The Ashtanga Yoga culminates with Samadhi, and Samadhi is portal or gateway for mysterious revelations, mysterious experiences and the transformations of yogi. Therefore, yogi attains certain glories and powers, so many siddhis. And then the third pada comes to mention the siddhis, the rationale behind attainment of such siddhis, the process of attaining such siddhis, the effects of attaining such siddhis, that is vibhuti pada. And the fourth chapter comes to mention the process of spiritual summum bonum of mankind, which is called nirvana, emancipation, kaivalya, moksha. And it mentions the very process of kaivalya. So that's how the 4 chapters are structured in Yoga Sutra. So he begins with the Samadhi Pada. And it must be noted that Patanjali's text is in aphoristic form, codified language. So we commoners don't qualify to really understand Patanjali Yoga Sutras. So to decodify, Vyasa penned down a scholium called Yoga Bhashya or Sankhya Pravachana Bhashya. It is because of Bhashyakara, it is because of Vyasa that we are able to have some understanding of Yoga Sutras. Because Yoga Sutras being codified, somebody needed to decodify, and Vyasa was authorized spokesperson of Patanjali. So it is not just a commentary. Vyasa has not just penned down a commentary. It should be understood that he was official spokesperson to decodify Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And therefore, Vyasa commences with his invocation to Patanjali. Yastaktva rupamadhyam prabhavati jagato nekadha nugrahaya prakshena klesha rashir vishama vishadharo neka vaktra subhogi sarvajnana prasuter bhujaga parikaraha pritaye yasya nityam devo hi sah vyopyat sthita vimalatanor yogado yoga yuktaha. The one who gave up the original form, gave up his poison and became poisonless, being Adishesha, primordial cobra, appeared on the planet for the well-being of mankind, who destroys kleshas in various ways, who has coils of snake, for whose purpose all the knowledge is created, who has an immaculate white body, who is the bestower of yoga, who is yoga by himself, and who is the Ananta, the celestial cobra. Ananta, protect us, protect us, protect us. And then begins the Samadhi Pada. The Samadhi Pada begins by defining the very subject of yoga. So it begins with the sutra. Atha yoganushasanam. So the text formally begins by defining yoga. It describes the yoga of yogis of highest hierarchy. It is not yoga of you and me. In the sense, we do not try to restrain our mind by what we do. We have so many things to do before we qualify and get empowered to go for restraint. It is not even our psychodynamics to restrain our mind by yoga. It is only one on the supreme hierarchy is looking to restrain yoga, restrain the chitta through yoga. We can question ourselves, why do we do our yoga? But put a question, why do I do my yoga? Why do we do our yoga? What are the psychodynamics behind yoga? That will tell us that we are not really Uttamadhikaris. Whereas a Uttamadhikari does yoga to restrain the mind stuff, restrain the chitta. And therefore, the very definition is for quintessential yoga. So, the text is begun by Patanjali saying that this is a formal beginning. It implies that Patanjali is not propounder of yoga but expounder of yoga. So we need to know the difference between propounder and expounder. Expounder expounds what is already propounded. And that is why I gave you the background that yoga was already propounded by Sriman Narayana, called Hiranyagarbha. And now Patanjali is just expounding that yoga. Patanjali has been of paramount importance to tradition because he was the first one and the only one and inimitable one to codify the Yoga Shastra in the form of Darshana Shastra. And then we get a viewpoint through Vyasa's commentary into understanding what Patanjali is saying. So, as I said, Hiranyagarbha was the first speaker of yoga. And that Hiranyagarbha is none else than Sriman Narayana. So, he defines yoga as Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And it entails that what is Chitta should be explained. Now, Chitta is the entire mind stuff. It's not just the mind. Mind is just the tip of the iceberg. And the tip of the iceberg has an enormous iceberg under it. It's a huge volume. So the mind that we experience as our mind is just the tip of that mind. There is an enormous ocean under it. Because this mind has been eternal mind. As we are eternal beings, we are all the time with some manifestation or the other. Out of 8 8.4 million yonis, life species, we keep on manifesting in some form or the other. Either we are terrestrial beings or celestial beings or infernal beings. And there are countless jiva rashis, countless forms of lives in all the various planes of universe. So we would be manifesting in some form or the other. So we have been with the mind right from time without beginning. So the mind stuff has all those impressions. If I may say so, something called as audio visual registrations, recordings. We don't remember something of our childhood. Where is the question of remembering last life? Very few people recall their past life. Then there are endless lives. So the mind is an ever experiencer of the universe. This continuous flow of universe, kalpa after kalpa, kalpa after kalpa, kalpa after kalpa, Brahma after Brahma, Brahma after Brahma. As I told you about the duration of kalpa, duration of Brahma's tenure spans to nearly 311 trillion years and about 40 plus billion years. Those are 100 years of Brahma. So Brahma's life spans to 311 trillion, 311.4 trillion years. And then there are Brahma after Brahma, replaced. So we have been in all those, not only kalpas, we have been there in all Brahmas. So the Chitta, you can understand how much matter is stuffed into our memory cortex of the Chitta. So that is why Patanjali has coined the word Chitta. And for our convenience, I said it is entire mind stuff. The Chitta gives us manifestations in various forms. The 8.4 million yonis have different kinds of minds, like we know. The mind of human being, the mind of dogs, mind of cats, mind of tigers, mind of ants. So many living beings we know on the planet. A tree itself is a living being. The tree has its own mind. So all those minds are in us because we have gone through all those manifestations. The tendencies of every mind, like our human tendency is one thing as against tendency of a dog, cat, cow, elephant, lion, tiger, eagle, sparrow, trees. So we have all those samskars contained in our mind. Like today we know the technology of microfilming. The chips, they have enormous data saved in them. So our Chitta is something like that. So, as student of yoga, during our study of yoga, we will have to basically crystallize this Chitta, which is on astronomical scale in dimensions. It's an enormous container of impressions, samskars, informations, experiences, and mindsets. So, Patanjali is not speaking about restraining this petty mind, paltry mind, which is just a bubble, but it is chitta vritti nirodha, not mano vritti nirodha. While in English, translators say yoga is restraining mind, it doesn't justify as translations. It is restraining the whole mind stuff. And this mind stuff needs to be imagined as to what it is. So Chitta is whole psyche. In Sankhya, Chitta is described as composition of manas, buddhi, ahankara. The mind with its functions of sensitivity, cognition, perception, memory, recollection, imagination, so many functions are there in the mind. So the very concept of mind is mind-boggling. We need to have a little inquiry into what the mind is, depending upon what the mind does. Mind senses, mind perceives, mind feels, mind acts, mind reacts, mind responses, mind has knowledge, mind has memory, mind has creativity, mind has imagination, mind has perception, cognition, sensation, tendencies. So that is just a part of Chitta. The other part of Chitta is Buddhi Tattva, the Buddhi, intelligence. So again, intelligence is not really justifiable translation for the concept of Buddhi of Sankhya or Sankhya Yoga twin system. It's the whole aspect of consciousness. With regards to living things, what is signature condition is that there is a consciousness to living things. Now, with consciousness, so many functions of consciousness take place. That is why we are animate beings. Because of consciousness, we have experience, we think, we have thoughts, we have so many functions, faculty functions. It is because of that conscious principle. So something that is buddhi, and then ahamkara, identity. All the living beings have identity. All the living beings are trying to protect their identity, cling on to their identity, hold on to their identity, identify their identity. No living being is without identification of its identity. It is not ego, it is not pride, it is not arrogance in that sense. So ego in philosophy has a different meaning than in psychology. So this is the meaning that philosophy gives. The identity or framework of identity, the concept of identity, the function of identity, the role of identity. So each one of them is ocean. Manas, Buddhi, Ahankara. Each one have enormous history, timeless history. We are all having, to say ocean depth itself is insufficient, because ocean has a measurable depth. This has immeasurable depth. So in that sense I am saying it is an ocean. Manas is ocean, ahankar is ocean, buddhi is an ocean. Not in the sense we understand ocean on the planet, because planet itself is a paltry bit than what ocean can be. Because ocean has a measurable depth. No ocean has immeasurable depth on measurable planet. So these are all immeasurable oceans. And that is Chitta. So in course of our study of understanding yoga, Yoga Sutra, you will somewhere have little idea of what this Chitta is. And Chitta has so many functions. Chitta gives perception, cognition, sensation, thought, impressions. Chitta gives you psyche, tendencies. So many things the Chitta is doing. It has enormous functions. And that's why it has so many modulations, modifications. So restraining those modifications is really yoga. So anyway, Patanjali commences Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Now formally begins the instructions on yoga for anyone and everyone, whether rajasic or sattvic or tamasic, whether deluded or wandering or alternating or one-pointed or restrained. The mind is of prenatal ones, postnatal ones, the children, the adolescent, the teenagers, the young, the old, the very old, the virtuous, the vicious. Yoga begins for everyone. Then he defines the yoga as Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is restraining, culturing, purifying, sublimating, cosmicalizing, culturing, faceting the consciousness. So then you will understand that we are also included in the definition if we take that extensive meaning of Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Somewhere we try to regulate our mental activities, culture the activities, chisel, carve, sculpt, culture, process our mind matter. So yoga is regulating, culturing, purifying, sublimating, cosmicalizing, restraining the consciousness. At this point, let me tell you, restraining consciousness is not just switching off light that you have in your room and you have a switch to put on and put off. So when you switch on, you get the light. When you switch off, the light goes. The Chitta is not restrained that way. There is no way that Chitta can be stopped by getting hold of a switch and then switching off. It should be noted that the Chitta is restrained en route, sublimation, ennoblement, quietude, placidity, sublimity. So this is an important piece of implied education that we get, that the mind or Chitta is restrained by quietening it, pacifying it, purifying it, sublimating it, cosmicalizing it. So for Chitta Vritti Nirodha, to cosmicalize the Chitta is important, to sublimate the Chitta is important, to ennoble the Chitta is important, to purify the Chitta is important. Then what when yoga is actualized? The more you go on this track, which I just now told you, sublimating, quietening, pacifying, sublimating, quietening, cosmicalizing, etc., we come closer to our core of being. We are shunned from the world. and then we go closer to our core of being. So here another implication to be understood is that by yoga we are going inwardly. Inwardliness, infacedness is a signature condition of yoga. The mind cannot be outgoing and going into yoga. The mind must be ingoing to go into yoga, because it has to go towards its core condition. And that's why it is an internal journey, inwardly journey, antarmukhi. That means inwardliness and infacedness. So it is a subjectivistic journey. Yoga is a subjectivistic journey. The more we go inwards, the more we shun ourselves from the world. Our mind is shunned from the world. The more it is shunned from the world, the more it is abstracted, and the more it is facilitated to go towards restraint. So basically it is inward movement of the mind. Mind should be drawn in. Mind should be going in. So that is what we have to understand by Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Are we going inwardly? Are we going subjectivistically? We can't be going objectwards and restrain the mind. We have to go subjectivistically and restrain the mind. So Chitta Vritti Nirodha also implies that the mind must be going inwardly. So we go towards the core consciousness. How far can we go in the realm of the core of consciousness? So the supreme form of yoga or quintessential yoga will take to a state where one remains in one's own state, essential state. Such yogicalized mind and restrained mind creates an essential state, which is our state of our self. And this self, what is this self? This is the self which is free from any delimitations such as caste, class, creed, gender, status, stature, condition, etc. If I put you a question, while you are in a wakeful state, outgoing state and a wakeful state, who are you? You describe yourself by way of caste, class, creed, race, gender, ethnicity, ancestry, etc. So class, caste, creed, gender, status, stature, conditions, these are the delimitations called upadhi. But if you put a question, who am I when I am in my dream state? We know there are three states of consciousness: a wakeful state, dreamy state, a dormant state. So if the question is put with reference to your being in dreamy state, in dreamy state you are just a being. You are not a man or woman. You are not young or old. You do not have caste, class, creed, gender, status, stature, etc. These are all outer garments which we put on when we are in a wakeful state. Then who are you in state of deep sleep when not even a dream is there? It's just a pure state of being. The pure state of being doesn't have any delimitation by way of caste, class, creed, gender, stature, status, etc. Nobody is rich or poor. Nobody is strong or weak. Nobody is wealthy or unwealthy. Nobody is vicious or virtuous in that state of sleep. That is how our state of being is, essentially. We essentially are not men or women or young or old or Occidental or Oriental, of this family or that family or this race or that race, or this creed or that creed. None of those things. They are all pertaining to our sheaths. The clothings over the body, those are all sheaths over the self. Self doesn't have anything of that kind. We are not even human beings, we are merely beings. Human being is a condition with reference to body that one has. And that embodied is considered to be human being, which is not true. Because that embodied has been in dog's body, cat's body, cow's body, elephant's body, demon's body, deity's body, infernal beings' creature's body, celestial life's body. So these are all outer sheaths that we are putting on. So in state of sleep, we don't have anything of that kind. We are just beings. Human being is a limitation. It is a clothing over the self. You can put on any clothes and then you will appear differently. You can put on Occidental clothes, Oriental clothes. There are so many clothing fashions or clothing customs. But that is just putting on a garment over the body. So, being human being is a body on the self. Being subhuman being is a body on the self. Being a superhuman celestial being is a body on the self. Self doesn't have any of those things. So, the more we go inwardly, when we reach that ultimate extent of samadhi, we will be just absolutely pure beings, having no form, no shape, no culture, no attribute, no characteristics. So that is what happens in yoga. When it is quintessential yoga, then you are absolutely you are abiding to your own essential form. Tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. So in the process of yoga, we slowly go towards that. Our journey is towards that state of self, which doesn't have any delimitation, any upadhi, which I am repeatedly telling you: caste, class, creed, gender, status, stature, pain, pleasure, delusion, wealthiness, unwealthiness, virtuosity, viciousness, nothing of that sort. So in the pristine form of ourself, one indwells in essential yoga. Otherwise, we get identities with our mind state. Like if the mind is happy, we say, I am happy. If the mind is sad, we say, I am sad. We never say that I am not sad, my mind is sad. I am not happy, my mind is happy. Or I am happy, but mind is not happy. It doesn't happen. We identify ourselves with the state of mind. Whatever is the state of mind is our state of mind, while the core being has no states. It has no states whatsoever. So when it is not yoga, we identify ourselves with these states that we have. So at other times when it is not yoga, the Atma seems to be identical with the state of mind, which has a wakeful state, which has a dreamy state, which has a dormant state, comatic state. And then it has also affiliation with caste, class, creed, gender, status, stature, pain, pleasure, etc., etc., etc. That is our state of outgoing mind. Now, these states are countless. The chitta vrittis are really countless, immeasurable. You cannot really put a number to states of mind. However, Patanjali mentions a functional classification with respect to yoga. There are 5 classes of vrittis. Vrittayaha, panchatayyaha, klishta, aklishtaha. So he describes the 5 states of chitta, which is a functional classification. In different realms and with different purposes, we will see different states of mind. Sometimes we say there are either minds, 2 kinds of minds, either vicious or virtuous, good or not good, good or bad, intelligent or stupid. So we have so many classifications, which are all states of mind. So there are countless states of mind, various degrees of happiness to various degrees of sadness, to various degrees of delusions. So there are countless states of mind. However, with functional classification in mind, Patanjali says, Vrittayaha, panchatayyaha, klishta, klishtaha. So Patanjali is now describing much about Chitta. Yoga is restraint. Restraint of what? Chitta vritti. Therefore, it implies that Chitta must be explained. The Chitta is implicitly explained. Then Chitta vritti. Vrittis are to be explained. Now he starts describing Chitta vrittis. That they are 5-fold, either of the class of klishta or of the class of aklishta. And these klishta vrittis are to be restrained. At our level, klishta vrittis are to be restrained. Aklishta vrittis are to be embraced. But for samadhi, of the nature of samprajnat, asamprajnat, of this yogi on supreme hierarchy, even that mind too has to be restrained. Otherwise, samadhi will not actualize. So therefore, chitta vritti is being explained. Let us try to understand his text. But enough for the time being. Let's proceed onwards in our next session. Namaskar, all of you.